In this video, I want to have a look at quadratic equations. So quadratic equations have a variable or the letter with a power of 2. So for example, it might have an x squared term or an m squared or a k squared. Whatever the letter is, it's going to have a squared term in there. So the other important thing is that quadratic equations can have 2 solutions. So normal, all the equations that we've been looking at, the linear equations that we've been doing so far, all just have one number that make that statement true. But quadratic equations can have 2. So if we have a look at our example, we want to solve y squared equals 4. So squared means times by itself. So we want a number that we times by itself to get an answer of 4. So there's 2 numbers that make that true. We could have y equals 2 because 2 times 2 equals 4. But we could also have minus 2. Because minus 2 times minus 2, when we multiply a negative by another negative, we end up with a positive solution. So minus 2 times minus 2 is equal to 4 as well. So we can either have 2 or minus 2. And the way we write that is with a little plus minus symbol. So it's a plus sign with a minus underneath it. So that means either positive or negative 2. So this one here, we've got w squared equals 9. Now we know that 3 times 3 equals 9, so we would have w equals 3, but minus 3 would also work because minus 3 times minus 3 is 9 as well. So we'll write plus or minus 3. Now these 2 are ones that we're familiar with. We know that 2 times 2 is 4 and that 3 times 3 is 9, but we won't always know straight off the top of our heads, and sometimes the answer won't be a nice whole number. So the way we do it, we think about working backwards and doing inverse operations. So the opposite of squaring something is taking the square root. So for this one, for example, we've got m squared equals 15. So we can write m is equal to plus or minus the square root of 15. Now, if that came out to be a nice number, we'd simplify it down. But the square root of 15 is not a nice number. It's a huge, horrible decimal. So we're just going to leave it as plus or minus the square root of 15. With question 4 there, it's got solve 6x squared equals 150. So before we get rid of that square, we're going to get rid of that 6 first. So we're going to do that by dividing both sides of the equation by 6. So we'll have x squared is equal to 150 divided by 6, which is 25. And we're going to write this step in just in case so that you can see how it works. We're going to write x is equal to plus or minus the square root of 25. Now you might know that off the top of your head, but if you don't, we can write in the square root of 25, hit equals, and it'll tell us that that's 5. So our answer would be x equals plus or minus 5. All right, 2 more examples. Our next one, we've got k squared divided by 3 is equal to 2. So to get rid of that divided by 3 first, we're going to multiply both sides by 3. And we'll have k squared is equal to 6. And then to find k, we'll have plus or minus the square root of 6. Now that doesn't come out to be a nice number, so we're just going to leave it as that, as a surd. All right, our last one, we've got 8p squared minus 3 equals 29. So there's a couple of steps in this one. The first one, we're going to get rid of that minus 3, so we'll add 3 to both sides. So we'll have 8p squared is equal to 32. Then we're going to go through and divide both sides by 8. And we'll end up with p squared is equal to 4. And the last step, this is looking very much like our first example now, but the last step is to take the square root of both of those. So p is equal to plus or minus the square root of 4, which is equal to plus or minus 2. Now, if you know what the square root of 4 is, you don't have to write this line in if you don't want to, but it's just helping us work it out if we weren't sure. So those are a few examples of quadratic equations.